Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 74. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest is... This is going to be a spectacular conversation. I know it before it started. I have these spidey senses for some guests, and this is one of them. So please name and who you are.
Peter Tertzakian. I've wear many hats. My day job is with ARC Financial. I also am the founder of Energyphile, which is my personal passion project on energy stories, energy literacy. Photographer, author, you name it. I try it.
Yeah.
Live life through experiences.
Yeah, and that's why this, the whole show is artists, entrepreneurs, and athletes. So you got two of the boxes checked off.
Right.
Maybe we'll get into your athletic endeavors and see maybe we can put the
that'll
trifecta.
be a relatively short story, but I have been
awesome
athletic in the past.
So the gist of the show is I like the guests to kind of share their origin story. Let them go back as far as they want to go.
Sure.
How they grew up, where they grew up, what inspired them, and then we'll kind of weave our way to where you are today.
Right.
So some guests go back to I remember when I was in junior high, I'm doing these things. So it's up to you. Take it back as far as you want to go, and then I'll just kind of drag you along and where we end up today.
Yeah, well, I think everyone has pivotal moments in their lives where a set of influences, especially people influences, sort of alters the course of how they track, whether it's their personal journey or their career. I was born in Saskatoon, moved to Edmonton at a young age. My father got a job in Edmonton. He was a PhD in chemistry, and so very scientifically minded. Instilled a love of science in me. I was a very curious person, still am. I think the first really pivotal moment that's relevant to our discussion today would probably be high school. And I don't know what it's like today, but back when I was in high school, you used to be able to take options that were peripheral to the core curriculum. And the two options that I chose in grades 10 and 11 were photography and film studies. And so even though I grew up in a scientifically minded family and had sort of this curiosity for science, the creative side of my brain was triggered through these two courses that I just latched onto and loved.
Was there anything before that? Before you got into those courses, did you have any creative moments and you were just kind of messing around with? Yeah,
messing around's a good word. Messing around, I used to love taking things apart, whether it's the toaster or an old TV set, bearing in mind my generation's TV sets were radio tubes and big clunky things. And so not only fixing, but a curiosity of understanding how technical things work was also very much in my DNA. Was it with your scientific background, your dad, being a smart person, is he showing you things, or is he just exposing you to things? Yeah.
Are you watching what he's doing, just picking things up?
Yeah, watching what he's doing, picking things up. It was fun working with him as well. He was an entrepreneur. He started up a chemical company and had a lab that I used to go to and help out in the evenings. As an entrepreneur, even today, it's all nights and weekends, and no different from my father. He used to go in and help, and then in the summertime help. And that was very formative for me also, because it also instilled a work ethic behind me.
Just watching it, right? Just being...
just being part of it, watching it, getting a sense of not only work ethic, but, passion and tenacity and those sorts of traits that I was brought up with. But there's no question that the technical side sort of breeds a certain type of wiring in your brain, more of the engineering, science, physics, that kind of stuff. But I always felt my curiosity was also driven by the creative side of me. And I didn't really fully appreciate that until I took the photography and the film studies. The film studies really taught me about how to tell a story and how to construct a story arc. And the photography, which was still photography, sort of taught me composition and graphic design.
Yeah. Did you latch onto those quickly? Like, was it did you know right away when you're either looking through the lens or you're like,
Yeah.
this was going to be a part of your life?
This was going to be a part of my life somewhere, whether it was as hobby, but later in life it came back in a big way in terms of how I differentiated myself from technical people in the ability to distill complex ideas that are technical and financial and convert them into easy to understand concepts and things that people can take away.
It's quite the balance, to have this technical skill set and right beside it the creative storytelling piece.
Yeah, it is. And it wasn't until much later in life, like I'm talking probably into my 40s, that I realized that the creative storytelling side is a much higher barrier to entry into differentiating oneself in business than the technical side, which is quite mechanical. The spreadsheets and numbers and analysis and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you got to be smart in the way you do that. But there's a lot of people these days that can do that. And I realized in my 40s there weren't a lot of people that could translate all that stuff into digestible information for people to understand.
Yeah. Which then if they understand it, they can either go out, move toward change, or they can just they have a better grasp on what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's right. So those were pivotal things, and it was also interesting. Again, my generation of film studies and taking film and even photography, which was with film, so dark rooms. And for the film studies, we also had to make our own films using Super 8.
No way.
On the film, and splicing and editing with film glue and all that kind of stuff.
Both very manual.
It's very manual, but that tactile experience of doing editing was also, I think, very formative in terms of really thinking about how you're going to tell your story. Like that you can't mess up. It's not like if you delete a segment on a video segment, you'd always recover it through the trash or whatever. Right? You can't do that if you destroy a piece of film. Like, it's done. It's done.
It's in that time, especially like Darkroom, when you're going to take a picture, there's more focus on like this. I need to frame this. I need to expose this. I need to take my time and actually do this right.
Right.
Versus today, where you could just rattle off 1,000 pictures in
absolutely
2 minutes.
And then the equivalent of post-processing, which was the darkroom, and the darkroom in larger techniques, dodging, burning, having a gut feel for exposure, all that kind of stuff. And it's a very, well, what should I say? Again, that's sort of the tactile experience of putting effectively a story together using visual media. Became important in my life later on.
And that's why it's going to be so. That's why this experience is cool, because it's just you lay the foundation for what's actually happening down the road. So it'll be awesome to once we get there. Like it's going to be so clear of why and how. So high school, you're kind of figuring out the creative piece of your brain. What else is going on? You're working with your dad. Evenings,
working
weekends.
with my dad, nights, weekends. But then got into university and.
Sorry, were you good at school? Did you excel at school? Like, was it a natural?
I wasn't a 90s student. I was sort of like, I don't know, 80s, generally speaking. A few of the subjects that I didn't care for, much less than that, which is interesting because the subjects that I didn't care for at that time were generally English. And which was a little bit, what do you call it? Not in sync with the visual arts. You'd think that, okay, the writing part of it. And so whether it was in high school and then later in university where you had to take, again, in my day, you had to take English 101, I did miserably.
No way.
And because I just didn't really care about the written arts, I'll call it, at the time. But later on, I would come back and be an author.
Exactly.
And I would put a lot of work into writing technique about 25 years ago. So I came back to it. So it's interesting. I mean, the stuff that you dismiss as a young person.
Yeah. What is that, you think? Just not interested, or just the course just wasn't speaking to you in a way that made sense?
Well, it was just, again, the way my curiosity was wired was towards science and fascinated by science. I mean, I used to read science books, not English literature. I didn't really feel like writing much.
Yeah.
I felt like telling stories through, say, visual film or just speaking.
Yeah.
It's just did not, the writing part of it just did not appeal to me at the time. So was I a good student? I wasn't like top of the class by any stretch. I was well above average, but not the best.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what did you take going into university? Did you have a path, like grade 10, did you know what you were going to do going into university, or did it take a few years to figure out?
No, I was going to go into the sciences. That was sort of a predetermined thing. I think another moment that was really interesting in grade 12, okay, I'm really going to date myself here on the program, but grade 11 and 12, the first commercially available calculators became available. Okay, so you can go back and figure out when that was. But in grade 11 physics, we had to learn how to use a slide rule. Still back then.
Wow.
And it was mandatory, and some of the kids, including myself, went up to the physics teacher and said, like, why do we have to learn this? Look, I mean, the calculator's coming out. Well, I don't know, the curriculum is slow to change, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to today, we've got things like ChatGPT and things like that, and people are saying, wait a minute, like, should you be writing, or should you use this automated process? But we can come to that because there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
Anyway, so where was I? Slide. So I ended up with my meager summer job earnings buying one of the first Texas Instruments programmable calculators.
The big one? Was it the big gray one?
No, it wasn't that big at the time. I think it was a TI 56 or 57 for anybody on the program who cares to remember. And I mean, I just latched onto that thing and was programming it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go into computer science.
No way.
Back then. So it's a long story, but I went into computer science and basically physics in university. Yep. And pursued that very science, math, obviously.
And finished it?
Physics.
Like what?
Well, not only did I finish it, in my third year, I got a summer job here in Calgary. No, again, I went to the U of A in Edmonton, living in Edmonton with my parents. Came to Calgary and was working at the university as a summer student in the Department of Engineering, doing programming.
Okay. What were you, like C++, or what was it back then?
Oh, no, actually back then it was Fortran.
Oh, so it's like
old
original
school
stuff,
Yeah, original stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I mean, I'll tell you something, like programming in those languages on those early mainframe machines, you had to be very clever about economizing on memory and being very efficient with your algorithms. So it forced one to think about efficiency.
Yep.
And by tweaking algorithms, I mean, you could cut down computing time from an hour down to a few minutes.
Just by cleaning up the code?
Just by cleaning up the code. Well, today, you can code up, and you can
be clunky.
You can get ChatGPT to write code for you. And we don't know if it's efficient or not efficient. Or I don't know. I don't know what goes on behind it. It does something. It does something. Okay, so I had the summer job here, and I was in res on campus at, I don't even remember the name of the halls, wherever it was, but all the friends that I made around me had jobs in the oil patch, and they were making like 3 times to 4 times what I was making as a summer student. And so a little bit of inquiries of, well, what are you guys doing in the oil business? I had no idea what the oil business was, frankly. Yep. And they said, oh, well, we're doing geophysics, we're doing earth science, petroleum engineering, so on and so forth. I said, oh, yeah. So anyway, I kind of scrambled around, and geophysics, okay, well, I'm taking physics. Long story short, I went back for my 4th year, took a couple of geology courses, well, more than a couple, 3 or 4, sort of strapped them on, and graduated with geophysics. And then that got me into the oil business.
And was it... when you start taking those courses, did you find a new passion, or did you look at it as like, I need this to, seems like all the opportunities are in this oil and gas industry and I need this? Like, what was your thought process to make that shift?
Well, the thought process was, candidly, I need to get a job when I graduate.
Yeah.
And here's an industry that at that time was hiring. Mm-hmm. And all I needed to do was take a couple of extra courses and I can apply my knowledge. Oh, and by the way, I can apply my knowledge and my passion for coding and algorithm development.
Yeah.
So, you can get a sense that at this time of my life, everything was deeply technical.
Yeah.
Deeply technical. Mm-hmm. Numbers were my life, basically.
Yeah.
And all the photography and film studies and stuff, that was sort of in my hip pocket now.
Yeah.
But not lost.
Mm-hmm. Just there.
It's just there.
So when you graduate, lots of opportunities in Calgary. And are you comfortable deciding to like live here, move here, and this is going to be like your
because
spot?
I already lived here as a summer student between third year and fourth year. So graduate, had a few offers, chose Chevron, which is still here downtown.
Yep.
And I chose Chevron because it at that time was one of the most advanced in using computation, big mainframe computers. They would allow me to do a bias towards computing and algorithm development versus other branches of geophysics. And the geophysicists and earth scientists that are listening would appreciate that most people with a geophysics degree went into interpretation and geological interpretation of where to drill the wells, whereas my interest lie more in the computational algorithmic side of developing the programs that would map out the subsurface of the earth. That was what I wanted to do, and that's what I did.
And did you know, like, you did your research? Chevron was the one that was kind of leading in that kind of technical environment.
Yeah,
you were like,
You got a sense just through student chatter and from the postings, and by fourth year, you kind of knew which companies were doing what and where you wanted to end up.
And that and it was just like, okay, that this industry is, I need a job when I graduate. This industry is going in a positive direction. Mm-hmm. There was no like deep rooted passion yet. There was no like energy is going to be, the main topic of your world. It was just like, this is the right time.
Yeah.
I need to get a job.
Yeah, that's right. Because it was an energy, the pull of energy that got me into the business, which seems a little bit, I don't know what the word is, odd. It was really the pull of being allowed to follow my passion of computation and the very numerical side of my brain, which you have to appreciate in the early 80s that digital processing was really starting to explode. Yep. And actually the oil and gas industry was at the forefront, along with weather forecasting. Weather forecasting and oil exploration were the two, I'll call them industries, that had the biggest horsepower in computing. And so to be in that fray was a very exciting time to be able to use the most expensive, biggest computers in the world to tackle these problems. But it wasn't with a sense, I'm working towards supplying society with energy needs. That wasn't really my passion. It was just, hey, I'm going and doing what I like to do.
I get to use these supercomputers.
And I get to use these toys. Yeah. That was enjoyable, and the people were enjoyable, and so life was good.
So what starts to happen? Your downtown career starts early. You're in the energy world.
Yeah, well, trying to avoid a complete biography or autobiography here in the interest of time. Again, the curious side of me said, okay, this is fun, this is interesting, but maybe I can also think about going back to school because I really liked school. There was a certain bug in me that said I wanted to travel, but I didn't necessarily want to be one of the people that was broke and traveling around. So what I did was I applied to a bunch of schools overseas, and I thought I would branch out my knowledge base, was part of my natural curiosity.
Yeah.
And what the heck, I'll take economics.
Wow.
And pursue like a master's level degree
And
in economics.
And just your, to go down that path. Like,
Maybe you're starting to get the sense I'm kind of a restless person.
Yeah.
Like I need to be doing deep dives in new things.
challenging yourself?
Challenging myself.
Yeah.
But also an innate curiosity. Okay, that'd be fun. I need to learn about that. So honestly, I can't remember what drove me in that direction.
Yeah.
Frankly, almost 40 years ago. But
A few things have happened.
a few things have happened since then. I do remember that, okay, want to see some other parts of the world, travel around,
Yep.
and I want to learn something different. So maybe I can take a year off. Where can I get a degree in a year? In the UK, you could.
Yep.
I think you still can in a year. And so, long story short, I got accepted at the University of Southampton, amongst some other schools.
Yep.
Did econometrics at the time,
There you
which
go.
I didn't even know what it was in great detail. So sure. And Chevron was kind enough at the time, and they said, well, we value your work.
Yep.
Maybe you're not ready to quit. Why don't you just take a leave of absence?
Which is the perfect storm.
Which was the perfect storm. Yeah. So I said, fine. So I went off.
Yep.
And that was interesting because the quantitative methods in economics, it's all time series analysis. The quantitative methods in geophysics and signal processing and algorithms are all time series analysis. So the jargon's different, but the underlying math was largely the same. And, without getting too technical, I started realizing this important concept, which I started to pursue from that point forward, which is the importance of, I think, cross-pollinating your knowledge. To think about your knowledge as a platform, building a platform to be able to address problems not in a one-dimensional way, but in a two-dimensional way. So economics plus physics, or economics plus geophysics, economics plus
Yep.
energy, which would come later.
Yep.
And then, sort of spoiler alert, then we start to bring in the creative side
Yeah.
of things
Yeah.
onto the platform. And then I started to become more intrigued by the notion of how does one differentiate oneself in a commoditized world
Yeah.
where there's lots of smart people. And it was clear to me that differentiating oneself was through this cross-pollination of applying different disciplines to a core problem.
Yeah. Was there anybody you're watching or looking at back then that was kind of, inspiring you, or just like giving you ideas of where things might go, or how, this cross-pollination idea? Was there anybody, were you reading anything, or is you just seeing things and you're kind of creating your own formula?
That's a great question. I don't think anybody was guiding me along those lines. It was
Just being curious.
Being curious and creating my own formula. So if you just looked at my resume and biography as described, you might think it's sort of a random walk. Okay, geophysics, get impatient, go do economics, get impatient, go do this. But actually, after a certain point, probably circa around my 30s, early 30s, it was much more prescribed.
You knew.
I sort of knew, okay, I need to bolt this onto my platform. I'm curious about it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to help me achieve the things that I want to achieve.
Yep.
And your next question would be, well, what did you want to achieve? You say, well, that part of it wasn't too prescribed, but it was just fulfillment for me in terms of continually building up a base of knowledge that would be really unique and that there would be demand for it.
Yeah.
And as people demanded the knowledge, which is the product that I personally offer, that then becomes quite satisfying.
Yeah. When you were in your 30s, when you get to your 30s and you're kind of you're putting things together, it's just more of a conscious decision of why you're doing things. You're curious in a bunch of different avenues, but now you're being a little more thoughtful of why you're going to go down this way and what it might lead to. You're actually thinking that way.
Yeah. Well, there was one more episode of going back to school, which I went back to do my MBA, and specifically not just to go back and do any MBA, but to do an MBA that would be centered around technology and technology ventures and the business of technology. And so fast forward now to early 30s, I said, well, if I'm going to do this, and by that time I was also married and had a 1-year-old, said, okay, if we're going to do this, we got to do it right. So went to Sloan School at MIT and got the degree from there, which was very inspirational and really did put a core lasso around my experiences and said, okay, this is the platform from which I can now go forward. I think I have enough tools in my
one would hope
on my tool belt between experience and education that it can take me forward.
What was that last kind of piece that you were like when it came together? You're like, here it is.
I think it was an understanding of business finance that was a missing piece. So I had pure science, very numerical. I had the econometrics, which was also numerical, but was also now into the social science world, behavior of people, and supply, demand, scarcity. But the missing piece was the business piece. The missing piece was understanding finance and the business piece, and so that came into the.
And just once you had it, you realized you had kind of.
Yes.
You had the pieces on the board to kind of move forward in a way that you wanted to.
Yeah, that's right. Also the reality that, okay, it's enough going to school. It's enough of this. I got to support my family. So, okay, time to get a job.
So you're armed. You have all these tools now. In your 30s, you know, you're still curious. So now what's actually...
Yes. So the 30s were an important period, and that's an important period in anybody's life. I mean, that's, to me, the period in people's lives where their careers can really take off. Right? It's your launching pad.
Why is that? What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, maybe it happens earlier to some people, for sure. I think when you hit your 30s, there's also a sense of wisdom in your 20s and the need to get serious about stuff. But the 20s can still be free-willed. And, you know, I hate to generalize, honestly, because everybody's different.
Yeah, I feel the same. The reason I asked, and I agree, like, everyone is different, but I felt the same way. In my 30s, something clicked. And I don't know if it's just a bunch of experiences and, like, good and bad. And then all of a sudden you get to a point, you're like, okay, now I have a clearer picture of what I'm good at, and I can kind of see where it might actually take me. So I felt the same way in my 30s.
Yeah, the 30s was one. It was also one where, again, you know, there's occasionally, I said it at the very beginning, a certain set of circumstances, a certain set of people that can alter the way you go in your career. And if you don't analyze it too much and you just know in your gut there's an opportunity and you seize it. And in my 30s, I did that. And I was introduced to a group of people. I realized I did want to go down now the finance avenue in my 30s. And so, skipping a whole bunch of details, in the mid-90s, I was one of the original founders / members of Acumen Capital Partners, which is still around here today.
So I remember their TV commercials.
So the gang there will remember me. That really got me into the whole world of finance, and that was a very pivotal moment, similar to the photography and the film studies, which I'd put in my hip pocket. It was pivotal because the world of finance and money still even today is really, in many ways, it's the real world. It's the way the world works.
Yeah.
Certainly in a Western capitalist, democratic kind of thing. The whole adage, follow the money, and understanding the psychology of money, understanding the painful lessons of losing money. Those were all very valuable things that I learned in the 30s, in my 30s, that then really set me up for the 2000s. Yeah.
When you say that intuition piece, when you meet people, you're like, okay, yeah, they're either saying the right things, or I'm connecting with them, and they're showing me an opportunity, and you trust your gut intuition to go down that path.
Yeah.
Is that, you had that moment then? Do those moments continue for you? And do you trust your gut intuition often, or is it just part of the equation when you're going to make a decision?
Yes, I think it happens. It doesn't happen often. And I would be lying, as would anybody who say that your gut fails you sometimes, right? It does.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go down. The trick then is to self-correct as quickly as possible to get back on track and not be phased. And I think that's something I learned in my 30s too, that, okay, there's some things that are tough, that decisions made are not necessarily all right. But I have to say, on balance, if I reflect, my gut has served me well. Yeah.
It's hard to, especially with the numbers, like a number background and the science background. To trust your gut is a little abstract, but generally it steers you down the right path.
Well, I always think in terms of the right path, that phrase you just used, I always maintain that there's no right path, but there's a lot of wrong paths. In other words, there's a set of right paths that you can take in life that will likely serve you well, especially and if you pursue them with passion but there's a whole set of wrong paths that can really take you into places you don't want to go.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, and I think this is such an important point as I think about some people that I meet or circumstances that I come across these days, that people are paranoid about taking the right path. Right? It's almost like their lives have to be prescribed all the way till their 60s.
Yeah.
And I say this is not right. Like there is a certain set of paths and circumstances you don't want to go down.
Yeah.
But don't try to be too prescriptive about the set of right paths. Like seize one and make the most of it. If
you're looking for the perfect, like the right path, sometimes it can paralyze you. Because then you don't want to make a move because you're like, is that the perfect one or is this the perfect one?
Right.
And you go nowhere.
Yeah. Now, I must say, given where I am at my stage of life, that I've become more risk averse than when I was, say, in my early 30s, as I said, with my wife and 1-year-old, and decide, okay, let's pack it up and move to Boston and go to school, right? And forfeit income to do that.
Yeah.
Well, my wife of, I don't know how many years now, 38 this year. We've been a great team, and we like a balanced amount of adventure. Not too out there, but less conservative than most people, I would say, in terms of let's seize that opportunity.
Yeah. 2000s. You were going to go there, and I took you on a bit of a
the 2000s. The 2000s have been really great in many ways because now I've got 5 years of finance. At that time, 5 or 6 years of finance under my belt, and the tools in my tool belt, I'll call them, were now very ready to be used. Yeah. Very ready to be used, if I can kind of use that metaphor. So I think the next really important thing that happened was, joined the firm I'm at now, ARC Financial, in 2002, having been in the investment banking finance world for 7 years, which, as I said, is the Olympics or the extreme games of the finance world. Right? And I now had started to refine the idea of what I said earlier, telling stories, because when you're in the finance world, basically you're telling stories about investment and things and so on. Actually, I think it's good to take a mild digression and bring in like the photography and the film studies and all that stuff, because and tying that to the idea of differentiating oneself. So that, okay, there's lots of people in finance, there's lots of people in energy, there's lots of people in the finance of energy. Okay, how do we narrow the set to make oneself unique and be heard in the growing noise, recognizing that new channels of communication were starting to open up with the internet. And it was starting to get noisy, nowhere near as noisy as today, but still recognizing that I'm in the business of mindshare. I'm in the business of market share for the mind with knowledge. And so how do I differentiate my product from other very smart people out there? And I realized, okay, it's the way you tell the story.
Interesting.
And so I started to bring into my presentations and my discussions visuals when everybody else was doing, bearing in mind, again, this is getting 20, 25 years ago. PowerPoint coming out was just, everybody just throws up bullet points. I mean,
big bullet points.
Big bullet, and people still do. Whereas my style was, okay, we'll throw in the bullet points, but let's throw in photos. And I already started to get in. Another thing was I got into the digital photography in the late 90s. Starting to use...
so it was coming back then?
It's starting coming back then, and by the early 2000s, I'm picking up Photoshop and now the digital darkroom. And back then, again, it was sort of rudimentary compared to what it is today. But you could do things even back then that could wow people, especially at that time.
That the storytelling piece is obviously fascinating to me because it's kind of how how I'm building my business.
Yeah, you're in the business, so you appreciate it.
And this environment is like straight to storytelling.
So
for you to go down that path, it makes you completely different, because I'm sure there's not a lot of people out there that are sharing stories and connecting a story to a business case. It's just this. All of a sudden, your creative brain just clicked in. You're like, it's stories, because the story piece, and the story piece is with you at a huge, from that moment and to where you are right now. It's just it's at the backbone of what you're doing.
It's at the backbone of what I'm doing, and it's more important than ever. And we know, that a lot of people talk about storytelling. The thing is, as I think I mentioned it earlier, it's far more difficult to gain an aptitude for good storytelling than it is to gain an aptitude in the technical world, in my opinion, having done both. Okay, I don't want to diminish the complications of being good at math, being good at coding, but I think you would agree, being good at storytelling and then mating that with the technical
anything
side,
data-driven.
There still today is a huge void. And back then, 20 years ago, the void was even bigger.
So when you start going down this path, what's what are your peers when they're sitting in these rooms and you're making these presentations and you're leading with story and you're going down the story path? Do people understand what's actually happening? And are they connecting the dots that you're actually driving business by sharing stories?
Well, I think people connect the dots. I mean, certainly the audiences that I was presenting to are connecting dots subconsciously, if nothing else, saying, wow, I like listening to this person. And I like the fact that he simplifies complex subject matter, which is something that I started to hear more and more frequently between the early 2000s and 2010s.
Yep.
And so then I started thinking, okay, yeah, this is really hitting the right buttons. It's not easy to do.
Yep.
This is a way of differentiating oneself in an increasingly noisy world. So I'm going to go even more
All in.
into now shifting my brain away, biasing my brain away from analytics
Yep.
to the creative side. And so the 2000s are so pivotal for me because they sort of not only married the technical with the creative, but also started to trigger a shift in emphasis. Because what the internet started to do was make the front end of what I would call manufacturing knowledge a lot easier in terms of the ability to
Yep.
get numbers online.
Just accessible.
Accessibility.
Yep.
And so then there was the emergence of a whole bunch of organizations in every discipline, whether it was economics or energy or pharmaceuticals or whatever, to gather data, massage the data, turn the data into information, charts, graphs, tables.
Yep.
And I said, well, okay, I've done that. Been there, done that, tick. Is that the highest value use of my time? No, because that's becoming increasingly commoditized.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So what is the highest value? And I progressively, over the 2000s, migrated to what I would call the right of the value chain. Okay, so the value chain of knowledge, I said I'm in the knowledge business. You got to understand that knowledge starts with data, which is basically on its own worthless. Then the data is massaged, formatted, turned into information. Information on its own is interesting. You say, oh, that's a cool chart. What does it mean? What does it mean? It means converting information into knowledge. And you start making opinion. And so as you, that leap from that's an interesting chart to what does it mean? Okay, that's a value add in a conversation with a decision maker. But when you go from what does it mean to you to now weighing a multi-million-dollar decision, that's the highest value add.
Right.
But how do you get there? Because you have the high degree of probability of confusing somebody who's making that million or billion-dollar decision with a whole bunch of technical jargon to the point of frustration. And that is actually what is happening today, by the way, is that there's such a deluge of data
Yep.
and information in the form of charts and graphs. People say, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to interpret this. Okay, fine, I'll help you.
Yep.
And if you put it in the context of storytelling and a story arc, draw on historical anecdotes, which is a whole other side of this that we need to talk about, to calm people down and then not tell people what to do in a decision-making capacity, but actually work with them to have them make the critical thinking decision. That's the highest value add. And so I'd say the last 5 to 10 years, that's the space I occupy.
And it's just, and it's taken you years,
Right.
just touching a whole bunch of different scenarios, having the technical brain, the creative brain to get to this spot.
That's it.
Like you couldn't have pulled this off in your 30s.
No.
In your like it's just these. It's taken this amount of time to get to this point where you're like, I can see it now. This is exactly.
Yeah, I would say that things they did click in the 2000s. That I had my first book, which we can talk about briefly.
Yep.
The second book, and then the third book, and all the other stories and things that I produce now.
Yep.
To this point, and the need for it is greater than ever because the confusion out there. I mean, bearing in mind 20 to 25 years ago, it was still paper books and a few channels, as I call them, of information that could feed into someone's brain.
Yep.
Again, their mindshare. So the mindshare, it's just like totally analogous to being in a really loud and noisy room and trying to get the attention of people by shouting.
Yep.
It's just not going to work. Right? What you want to have happen is you're in a big noisy room and people seek you out because they know you.
Yes.
And you have something to tell them, and you can lean over into their ear and tell them.
Yeah. Which is interesting, right? In my marketing brain, my brain goes to like build a brand. when you build a brand with trust and people understand what you stand for and what your values are and how you think,
Right.
then they do come find you.
That's it.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
they want to be a part of it.
Well, that's such an important thing we haven't talked about is that notion of trust, which today, of course, is actually the highest value commodity.
Yeah.
Because it's so scarce.
Isn't it? Is it weird to say that though? Like
It is.
Like I think.
Well, is it weird? I don't know. It's a fact.
But when you, I guess it goes back for me. The reason I say this is because when you grow up, you know, it's just kind of those things that's instilled in you. You know, you don't lie. You say what you're going to do.
Right.
Just basics, right?
You're embarrassed if you lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to be trustworthy. It's just
Right.
something you do. I
Right.
grew up in sports, right? You got a team behind you, so you got to be trusted when you go do your thing.
Sure.
So when you say it's not happening, that's why I'm like, isn't it weird that the basic thing isn't happening?
The basic thing isn't happening. There's still plenty of trustworthy people out there. I happen to believe in the goodness of mankind, humankind. Though what is happening is that there is an orbit of people that lie, are disingenuous, promote disinformation, poor quality data information
Yeah.
that basically pollute the whole environment.
Yep.
And so you don't know who to trust. And so creating a brand and franchise of trust is paramount. If you're going to cut through the noise,
Yeah.
Which is increasing.
Especially in your industry, the noise theme in this conversation is very clear to me. Because in the energy industry, there is a lot of, well, in any industry,
I
but
think
yours,
it's in any industry, Jeff. I mean, it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's
I agree.
pharmaceuticals,
It's marketing.
It's all marketing.
Yeah,
Like the amount of stuff coming at you.
yeah.
Whether, you know, we used to say, oh, those billboards are just clogging up the visual pollution. Okay, we're way beyond the billboards.
Yeah.
The amount of stuff, information, I don't know, some of it I don't even call information, coming at you is just staggering.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was a trend I noted around 2011, 12-ish, as I was thinking about whether I should write another book or whatever, is, okay, what is all this new channeling of information doing to people? Because I was thinking, should I write a third book or not? And I realized most people don't read books anymore. And so if they don't read books, because attention span's going down, and there's so many other ways of getting your information. So, if I wrote a third book, give it to you, you say, well, that's very nice, Peter, and it may go on your bedside table or probably go on your shelf or who knows wherever else, eBay.
Yeah. If it's autographed.
If it's autographed. Writing a book largely at that time became, even today I would argue, is sort of an exercise in proving your credentials that, okay, I've written about this, therefore I'm good. Not to diminish book writing and reading, but that's the reality of people. Just the attention spans have declined. The amount of time available to absorb information has declined. So maybe I ought to think of a different way of trying to achieve mindshare, which is what led to my Energyphile project, which is what led to the understanding that you want to publish things not as an entirety in a whole book, basically blow your brains out for 18 months writing a book only to find out that it's out of date by the time you finish it, that you can bleed out the information in more effective ways.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because that's part of what we do is like releasing micro moments. So you have this long format piece, whatever that is. That could be written, that could be photos, it could be video, whatever, and then you deconstruct in these micro moments and leak those out over time. And it's just kind of steady drip over
Well, what
and
is
over.
TikTok really? I mean, it's that kind of thing, right?
Totally.
It's just like, I don't have time to watch a 7-minute video anymore, so I'm going to watch one for 30 seconds. I mean, that's the psychology, which, I recognized when somebody mentioned to me the 3 and 30 rule. Have you heard that? if I can grab your attention for 3 seconds,
Yeah.
I'll have you for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But if I lose you in those first 3 seconds, it's done. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
So even that first 3 seconds of the video, that's why I place so much emphasis, like in my Energyphile project, on my what I call vignette cards. The graphic design has to be of the quality that it grabs your attention.
You want to come into it.
They want to come into it.
Yeah.
Then I have a maximum 100 words. 100 words takes 30 seconds or so for most people to read.
Yeah.
If I have you for 3, grab you by the image, I got you for 30. If I get you for 30, I'll escalate you to a short story and the whole environment.
Right.
So that was sort of the whole philosophy of what I was trying to do. I think it's more salient than ever. Now, of course, video is much more a part of it. And so I'm still thinking, like, okay, I'm constantly thinking, how am I going to be able to get mindshare in an exceedingly noisy world?
And if you're not always thinking about that, what happens?
You become drawn into the commoditized world, and the value of what you have to offer diminishes rapidly.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, some people will say, well, that's very callous, but it's the truth. That's what happens. And I think you can even see it with, and I'm by no means an expert on TikTok and this sort of thing. But
you're aware of it, though.
But I'm aware that today's TikTok star has only got expected life expectancy on video of what?
Yeah.
Like most of them, sort of a flash in the pan if you don't innovate on your content.
Totally.
Potentially innovate and try and find other channels to disseminate your information.
To stand out.
Like
it
does like it's
your mindshare piece is exactly how it has to operate online.
Exactly.
You can't just be a one-trick pony on TikTok. You have to understand that if a brand approaches you,
right,
instead of just taking a picture and getting $10,000, like maybe there's a way to partner with the brand and take a chunk of the business or whatever it looks like. There's a different way to do it.
That's it. Yeah. If you're fortunate enough to go viral or semi-viral, then you need to use that as a immediate platform for branching into other channels.
Totally.
Otherwise, your half-life is very short.
Because there's the next generation, the next person that goes viral.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're not moving forward with your ideas, and this person just knocks you down, it's a run.
That's it. Yeah.
The book piece. This is like, you touched on it earlier, not liking English.
Yeah.
And when you decide to become an author, obviously that artist piece is right there. So your creative brain kind of gets turned on, or the idea of, what got you on the path to writing a book? Sharing information, obviously, but was there something that just needed to get out of you?
Yeah. Well, yes, and it was more than that. Again, it was the idea of differentiation, and also, and another important part of all this is listening to people, listening to your audience, being tuned in, having a little antenna.
Yeah.
Okay, what's working in my message? What isn't? And what kind of feedback am I getting? So around 1998, 1999. I'm making presentations, I'm using interesting visuals, starting to tell a story arc, past, present, future. People come up to me after a presentation and say, that was really good, you're really good telling a story. Why don't you write a book?
Are you comfortable on stage, by the way, always?
No.
Okay.
No. I was terrified. Oh, probably... Well, you want to hear that story?
Yes. I do, actually.
Yeah, it's a great story because I was at Chevron and I had this mentor. His name was Ross. And Ross took a liking to me, really wanted to promote me early in my career. He says, you've got some really good stuff here that you've developed. I want you to make a presentation to management. I said, okay. Bearing in mind this is a day of overhead slides, right? I said, okay. So I made the presentation, and he said, okay, you're going to give it to me first before you give it to management. So we're sitting around a boardroom table, overhead projector at the end of the table, onto the screen. So I get up and basically bumble and stumble and make mistakes, expecting him to encourage or do whatever. And I mean, he just sat there with his arms folded, looking at me with steely eyes.
figure this out.
Like, you figure it out, because management is going to be ruthless, and I want to teach you. So, it was from that moment that I took it more seriously, and I wanted to figure out how to be more of an effective presenter.
Yep.
The company was good in terms of providing presentation courses, public speaking courses, and so on that I took. But I really didn't get comfortable with public speaking until probably 15 years after that.
Wow.
Right. And still, I would say that if you don't have butterflies getting on stage, there's something wrong with you, right? Because you need to be able to channel nervous energy into positive energy.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of tools and techniques of doing that. But that's a whole separate thing. Fast forward again, we were talking about what?
Books.
The book? The books?
Just like starting, the idea of I need to...
Right, okay, yeah. So
write.
people would come up to me after... but by the late 90s, I was getting pretty good at making a presentation.
Yep.
People would come up and they would say, hey, that's super interesting. Why don't you write a book?
Like you said, the listening piece that you just slid in there is, I think, a lost art or a skill set that is very special, and it's the one that kind of gets you going.
I'm going to tell you, it's so important. And even to this day, I listen to people, I encourage people in my groups that I work with, give me criticism. Like, just tell it to me like it is, because I cannot afford to be saying things, delivering things in a certain way that is not appealing. So you have to have thick skin sometimes. And there's sometimes, honestly, we don't have time to go into it, but I've blown a presentation or two. And boy, oh boy, that just, people come and say, you should have done this. Okay, got it. I'm now going to innovate and make sure I do better next time. You got to listen. It's just really important in that whole piece about delivering quality uniquely to get the mind share. Right. By the way, if you don't have the quality, you'll never build the trust.
That's it. Because without the quality, then you're
But this is so important because we're putting emphasis on storytelling. But if you tell a bunch of nonsense stories that are full of fluff, forget it. Like, that'll only take you so far.
For sure.
Right. But the book, so people say, well, why don't you write a book? So long story short, I had a few false starts. Like, this is hard. Right, but this is really hard. And by the way, I haven't been accustomed to writing, although I was starting to do more writing in terms of my work as an analyst in the financial community, writing research reports on companies. I started to refine my writing and did more of a deep dive into effective business writing, how to do that. So constantly curious and learning. Okay, so write a book, couple false starts, met a mentor. The mentor had written books, passed the idea by him. He said, how do you want to publish this? I said, well, I'll kind of publish it here, pass it out to the local community, the book. He said, why don't you go for the gold? He says, I'll help you. He says, we need to get a New York publisher for you. So, again, false starts. This is where the tenacity comes in. Never say no. Humiliating moments. Really harsh criticism. Even taking a book proposal to a New York agent who was absolutely ruthless and brutal in terms of criticism, but not going home and giving up, just saying, I'm going to show this guy, coming back again until, there was a moment, by the way, in New York in 2004, and we're sitting in a bar, and finally the agent looks at me and says, I think you have it. We're going to go with this. And that was sort of like the really pivotal moment because that led to the publishing of my first book, 1,000 Barrels a Second.
And that tenacity to keep going, that thick skin, was that hard? And this might be an assumption, but I'm assuming you perform at a high level. I'm sure when you dig in, I'm sure you achieve things. And this person or this, when you're now going down this new path of writing a book and you kind of get knocked down, criticism, is your only option to come out swinging and not to roll over? Or was there like moments you're like, this isn't... Is it for me?
Yeah, no, there was never a rollover moment for the book. I mean, I can probably bring about other examples where I said, okay, this is not for me.
Yeah.
But the book was never a rollover moment.
You knew you were going to...
I knew I was going to go forward. And that was just such a pivotal moment in the publishing of 1,000 Barrels a Second. And I don't know if you know, as a consequence of that, I made it on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart.
Okay.
And that was really a launching moment as well.
What are you thinking when you those two wins? Like those are big
wins.
You say mindshare, yes. I'm thinking your brand is developing into this monster.
Yeah.
Do you know that you're kind of you got something?
Yeah, I know I've got something. And that's an interesting point because, it could have been taken further, the first book. And so I learned some lessons about, we talked about it earlier. You go viral on TikTok, but if you don't branch out, channel out, and use that as a springboard to the next level. And I have to admit that I didn't use it as effectively as I should. The book, even though it was a global bestseller at the time, and got me on all these amazing shows and things, and certainly it served me very well. I've done very well. Could I have gone even further? Probably with the book, but I have no regrets. I then learned from it. Second book, and then the third book, which was self-published. But anyway, it's been a great journey. The literary side, and I think it's important that the publishing of the second book, which was The End of Energy Obesity, I think was in 2009 or 2010. That was kind of a pivotal moment because that was the moment I also sensed, hey, this publishing industry that I was introduced to in 2004 or 5 was radically changed. Even in that short half dozen years. That, okay, we're getting ebooks, we're getting now all of a sudden all this content on the internet. And so that was the moment I realized, okay, this is probably the last time I'm going to pursue going through the traditional publishing route. We need to redefine how to disseminate information. And then the whole story thing. So also business books, I tried to make them interesting. People say they were interesting, but I felt that they were just too dry. And that's when I got into the creative nonfiction way of telling stories about energy, which was The Investor Visit. And that was the third book, which broke things up into short stories, which you can read in 20 minutes or listen to on the audio version in 20 minutes.
Have all the options. People can digest it anywhere they
can digest it anywhere they want. And then the idea of what I call book clubs around a 20-minute story is way easier than saying, hey, Jeff, go read this book. Take you 6 hours. Then we'll do a book club. I mean, who does that anymore other than, fairly diehard book readers, of which there are many, but not in the business world, I find.
Everything's moving too fast, and there's so many, like you said, there's so many things coming at you. And your energy is needed in a bunch of different places. So to ask for 6 hours, it's an ask.
Oh, yeah. These days, asking busy people for 6 minutes is a challenge amidst the noise.
Can you, I'm very curious about your art background now. I'm very curious about your photography, that whole side of you, because it's just this, I'm a creative person. I don't paint, I'm a creative thinker. I love the idea of, I have a lot of respect for painters, photographers, videographers, because it's such a creative outlet. So how does this come back into your world?
Well, it comes back again. It's like, look, I mean, I'm not even sure I can say I'm a photographer. I'm an amateur photographer. I can't compete unless you do something like all in full time with any professional photographer. But I know how to take a decent photo. I know how to make it look quite good in Photoshop and then use it in a story to talk about energy issues or other things in my information value chain that I talked about earlier. That I know how to do, and that's a huge differentiator. So can we take it to the next step is sort of what I was thinking, to make it interesting, to capture people for that 3 and 30 moment. well, maybe we can try thinking about taking energy photos and using the power of things like Photoshop, which by 2015, 16, I was pretty good at.
Yeah.
And I've refined it even more.
Yep.
And said, okay, well, let's try turning some of these photos into pop art and sort of rise. And so, by the way, I'm also a student of art history. I met my wife 37 years ago at an art history course in the evening. So love art in general.
Yep.
And I also love what's interesting about periods in art history where there's disruption, which we can also learn from in this conversation about how to adapt and evolve the way you communicate, right? Because there's definitely disruptions, dislocations in art, say with the Impressionists.
Yep.
And all the different movements, major and minor, throughout history. Of course, there was the pop art movement, which intrigues me tremendously, because I kind of grew up in that era as well. And so I said, well, can we apply kind of pop art to energy art and like be really differentiated? Okay, so I mean, you kind of think about this, like how many people can grind numbers in the world of energy and understand the physics of energy and are really smart? There's a lot. Okay. How many people can take photos of energy and weave them into a story about energy? No, there's a few. The few that do it well. Right. So but if you're really paranoid about the idea of being the only one to capture someone's mind share and to be so unique, you got to kind of take it to the next step. And so augment it with different things that nobody else can collectively bring together. Remember, at the very outset of the podcast, we talked about that, right? The cross-pollination of the knowledge and understanding the power of that. Again, it's the cross-pollination of all of this. So in the last couple of years, I've sort of branched out, experimenting with some pop art and things. So, we've got a show coming up in June.
Where is it?
We're going to show it in Canmore at the Elevation Gallery.
Okay.
And you're going to see some of that.
Awesome.
It's pretty cool.
And like we talked about off camera, my good friend Jackson Haglund is going to have some of your stuff in his office now, which is really cool. So it's a
yeah. And again, I'm sort of pursuing this as a passion. But it's and I love the art. But what I really love is tying things together and creating a really unique experience for my audiences, right? So not only make it about the anxiety of decision making, but making it a little bit more enjoyable in terms of understanding context, throw in some art, throw in some writing, and it becomes a whole experience.
Can you you've done so many things in your life, and do you ever allow yourself to be reflective and think back on like all these pivotal moments and how they all have like stacked up to get you to where you are today? And was it conscious decisions, or was it just like being curious and moving and trusting your gut and moving in a direction that kind of just put all these pieces on the board to get you to where you are right now? Because it's this combination of everything. Right. And it's a lifetime in the making. I'm just wondering how you, when you're in the moment, and you're in your 20s and you're doing all these things. Are you just, can you see what's going to happen? Or are you just going in a direction that feels right at that moment?
Can I see what's going to happen personally? I can see what I can make things happen. Getting them to happen is becoming more and more complicated. It's I mean, again, just the noise out there. It's tough, and you can't do it alone. You have to do it with people. I pride myself on being able to do a whole bunch of different things and go deep into a whole bunch of different things and done that. But after a certain point, if you want to elevate to the next level, you have to gather around you people.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate. I've had small groups of people who have been super supportive or super, I guess supportive is the word in getting me where. But to take all this stuff to the next level, I can see where it can go.
Yeah.
But it's going to require a lot more effort. And so now I'm self-reflective of, well, do I really need to do that? I'm kind of reflecting on all the choices that I've made, some of which have been a consequence of random circumstance, some of which has been consciously manufacturing a circumstance. That I'm sort of at the point I've reflected on all that and said, well, do I really need to do that? It's been fulfilling. But the thing about is, I'm sure you as a curious person as well, you can't turn off curiosity. It's in your DNA.
Yeah, so you have to understand that, embrace it, and then just kind of just manage it somehow so it doesn't.
Yeah, you have to manage it, and you have to be reflecting, especially now at my stage of career, stage of life. Say, okay, how much effort is that going to take? Okay, because certainly in my 30s, 40s, and even 50s, it sort of had boundless energy and tenacity. And it's hard work. I mean, all the stuff I've described maybe feels to you and the audience as, wow, that's really cool and so on. But what I'm not telling you is, like, this is 24/7. Like, you cannot turn it off. This is nights, weekends, determination, recovering from setbacks. Like, there's a whole other side of the story that is very taxing.
To operate at that level is all consuming.
It is.
To have those people in those rooms come to you to create that kind of interest. It's not by accident. That's not just one moment in time that created this energy. It's this relentless drive to keep pushing forward.
It is. Yeah, it's a relentless drive. And some of it is in your DNA, but at some point also the reality sets in, well, okay, how much can you really do given so many hours in a waking day?
The balance or unbalance of keeping all these things moving forward, is it a natural thing for you to have a bunch of projects on the go all the time and just knowing that they're all kind of interconnected? Is it just a natural state that you can?
It's a natural state of chaos and constantly multitasking, which all the research says is not a good thing. But I've been doing it for so long that I know how to do it. But I have to say, in the last couple of years, I've learned to start taming the whole fear of missing out as well, which is something that curious people can get sucked into. And so you end up having scope creep on all the things you're doing. And the realization sets in that, okay, can't do it all again. You gotta rein it in. And at least take all the different projects and passions you're working on and make them intersect to a common goal. So that's something that I've been working on quite a bit the last couple of years, especially the last year.
This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
I know your name from being a Calgarian and just kind of working the energy space. So I knew your story from the peripheral. This has been a very interesting chat about the path that led you to where you are.
Right.
I appreciate your time. I end the show with one question.
Okay.
When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Greatest place to live, honestly. Like, I've had opportunities to go work in some of the biggest centers in the world, and I've always said, no, this is the greatest place. I love it here. We love it here, my wife and I. And so I think the corollary to that is that there certainly are a lot of people that think this is such a privilege to live here, but there are a lot of people that don't necessarily appreciate it and think that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. I've been on the other side of the fence and seen what goes on, and honestly, I love it here. It's it's home.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Thanks again for your time. You are I know how busy you are, so to take the time to do this, I really appreciate it. It's I don't take it lightly.
Oh, I super appreciate being on the program and being able to tell the story, which you so easily extracted out of me because I don't usually talk a lot about myself.
Yeah, and this is an interesting scenario, right? I don't like to talk. I hate talking about myself, which is why this environment's great for me.
Yeah.
Because I just get to listen and ask questions, and it just becomes this fluid conversation. So
yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.